Hello everyone, it's Mary. Today I'll talk about the books that I read in the month of June and July. I thought I'd combine the 2 months together because I haven't been reading much in July. I was stuck with a book for quite a while. The first book that I'll talk about is a book about parenting again, and it is Your Competent Child by Jesper. I think it's how you pronounce his last name. He is a Danish author. And this is the Italian translation, but I'm pretty sure that it was translated into English as well. And I have to say I'm pretty happy that I found the sort of books that I want to read in regards to parenting, which follow the thread of positive parenting and attachment parenting. And it's based on the fact that your child is actually a human being, which it seems like obvious, but it's really not. I will say he just because I have a son, but of course it's he or she deserves the same respect that you deserve as a person. A lot of, especially in my culture, I feel a lot of people forget that children are actually people and they don't own them, and it's not in their rights to actually to beat them, to yell at them. The reasoning behind this kind of attachment kind of parenting, in which you listen to your child's needs and you respond to them, especially in these first 3 years when it's it's a very delicate kind of situation, because they're growing up very fast. They don't have all the tools to actually express themselves. So it's very hard to contain them and to understand them and to be understood by them as well. What this book says, it's that your child is competent. He knows what he needs. And when he's born, he has already his kind of personality that you just have to listen to and to understand. So you need to be in tune with his needs and your own needs as well. It's not that you have to stop everything and just the child is your boss. Nobody is the boss. You have a relationship with your child. You have to find a common ground. It's all about trusting your own child from the beginning. When you're told as soon as he's born that you need to breastfeed him, and he knows when he's hungry. So you shouldn't follow any schedule to breastfeed your child. Because he's competent, he knows when he's hungry. You need to create a sort of connection, which is very hard to create, especially in the first years of his life. So that's basically the focus of the entire book. Find some sort of dialogue based on the fact that we have the same dignity, and it talks about self-esteem and how if somebody actually has to follow your rules because they're scared of you, they lose respect in you, and they possibly they are scared and they will follow your rules, but they wouldn't understand the reasoning behind it. They will rebel at some point, and if they don't rebel, they probably will grow up as people with no self-esteem, that doubt themselves a lot, and they're very insecure. So yeah, I think it's very interesting, and it was a very good read. And I read a book that has the same sort of tone to it, but it's not it's not a parenting book. I actually read two by the same author, who was Marshall B. Rosenberg. Of this, I have the Italian version. Most of these books I bought in Italian because I want to be able to refer to them and to actually lend these books to people, because I'm like, you really need to read this book. I think it can be useful. But yeah, I read this one, which is Nonviolent Communication. So that's exactly what the title says. I'm just going to put a picture here. It talks about nonviolent communication, which is something that I feel it's kind of groundbreaking to me. Probably it's obvious to a lot of people. I don't know. I had never heard of nonviolent communication before. He traveled worldwide to actually help people resolve conflicts, and talking about nonviolent communication. He's no saint, as he says throughout the book. He learned to communicate in this kind of way. Gives a lot of examples, which were very useful, but it's very hard to, you know, to actually do what he says. He says basically that everybody communicates in a violent way. Each of us, even if you're not aggressive, you communicate in a violent way somehow, because we learned as people in this kind of society, even in your family, but globally, you're not taught to satisfy your own needs, and anger, which is the main thing that he focuses on, is actually, it's not really a feeling, is more of the expression of your unsatisfied needs. So you need to look for the cause of your anger. If you feel angry, you actually don't feel just angry. You feel maybe sad or disappointed because this and that happened. So you need to, when you feel angry, you need to focus on why. What is the need that is not being satisfied? Then you can take responsibility of your own feelings, and that is very hard to do. It's just so much easier, and it gives you this instant kind of satisfaction to get angry, to, you know, to just blame someone else for your anger, while your need was just to have a hug. So why don't you just say, give me a hug because I'm tired? But then you feel sorry maybe, and you don't feel good after you did that. This book teaches you how to listen to another person and how to react to what they're saying without being judgmental, which is very hard. This really helps you you know, clear this kind of judgment and actually listen to other people. I think the key of it all is actually that sometimes I would say, okay, I don't need to get angry all the time. Sometimes I can just let it go. And that's something that I wanted like to almost tattoo on myself, just let it go, because it's not that important. But this book does not tell you to let it go. It tells you that your feelings and your needs are all legitimate, and you shouldn't let them go. You should actually express them, but in the right way, because if you get angry, you're not going to get what you want, actually. You know, it's I thought it was so eye-opening, and I really loved it. Even though it can be utopic somehow, I just feel like everybody needs to read this book, and it can be so useful, even, you know, whether you're an aggressive kind of person like I feel I am, or if you are like a very meek sort of, I don't know, more calm person. I think just everybody could get something good from this kind of book. I'm sorry, it was such a mess to explain. I bought also The Surprising Purpose of Anger, Beyond Anger Management, Finding the Gift. And I thought this was a book because, silly me, I didn't notice that it was actually a booklet, and it's basically very repetitive. If you read the other book that I was just talking about, it's just, it focuses on anger and, again, how to avoid it, basically. So I won't talk about this one, and I do not recommend this. Just read the other book because it contains everything you need. Then I read another book, I would say, about parenting almost, which is Raising a Bilingual Child by Barbara Zurer, Pearson, PhD. I decided when my son was 6 months that I wanted to raise him as bilingual. And I've debated with myself whether to do this thing or not, because I am not a native speaker. I am Italian 100%, of course, as you can probably tell by my accent. And I don't have a perfect accent. What's that? Is that a camera? Who's that? Who's that? I was like halfway through this book when I decided to, to just do it, because, everything that I was reading were just positive things. So we're doing OPOL, which is one parent, one language. Yes, I think I spelled that correctly. So I'm speaking exclusively English to my child, and my husband, he is Italian, so of course he's speaking Italian. And between the two of us, we're speaking Italian because, again, my husband doesn't know a word of English. So, yeah, so far my son is almost a year old, and he doesn't really speak. So I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but after reading this book, I'm still convinced that it is the right thing to do. It also has a chapter on actually raising a bilingual child if you're not a native speaker. So actually this book as well supports this kind of thing that I'm doing. I just want him to be a part of this kind of world that I entered more than 10 years ago now. All the things that I'm consuming media-wise, book-wise. The 95% of the books that I read are in English. The things that I watch are, from an English-speaking country or culture. So I really want him to be able to be a part of this, and then he can decide for himself if he wants to, if he's interested to actually go on and be a part of this, or just, I don't care about English at all, and he can do that. I'm not forcing him to like English stuff or stuff that it is in English, stuff that it is in English. I'm not really talking about this book, as you have noticed. I'm talking just about my experience, but I think this book is useful. I don't think it cleared my doubts, and it doesn't really give you a sort of method, but after reading also other than reading this book, reading articles or reading other people's experiences, it's just, you cannot have a step-by-step guide. It's not possible, because every family is different, every child is different, every person is different, and there is no way that works. It's just you have to find your own balance in your own way. And before you start, you have a lot of doubts. When you actually start, it feels natural. Sorry if you're hearing my son kind of crying, but my husband is giving a bath to him, and he doesn't really like it that much. But yeah, what can you do? It's the only time that I have to talk to you guys. So yeah, I think this is useful. It does give you some tips in situations that are likely to occur, like once he gets older, I think, because now, of course, the interaction is like a big monologue, and it actually helped me start speaking to him, if it makes sense, because you're always told from when you're pregnant that you have to speak to your child, but it's not something that comes very natural, at least not to me. I was constantly reminding myself to actually speak to him. And before 6 months, I wasn't really speaking to him. I was, of course, interacting with him, but I wasn't really speaking. And since I had this kind of task to just start speaking English, it was just an excuse to start actually speaking at all. If you are looking for doing this kind of thing, then definitely pick this one up. It also has a lot of case studies and a lot of experiences that can be useful to you. Next up, the last nonfiction book that I read was Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls 2. I have the Italian version, but I'm not going to put the English one because it's basically the same sort of design, so I think it's recognizable. And this book is by Francesca Cavallo and Elena Favilli. They are Italian authors, although this was written originally in English, and then it was translated, not even by them. But yeah, I found this, again, I really loved the first one, and I did find this one inspiring and just a pleasure to read as well. It has, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it has stories that are targeted towards children of women, and it has some beautiful illustrations as well. So it is structured with the story on one page and then the illustration on the other page. Every time that I read a book like this, it just gives me this I don't know, this kind of inspiration to read more about great women, and it makes me proud. It fills me with joy, so I really enjoyed this one. Then we have my two fiction books that I read. One was a reread, and it was The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, which is the third book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. And yeah, I buddy read this with Natalie over at A Curious Reader and Yamini over at A Skeptical Reader. I'm just going to leave links to their channels down below. It was a pleasure to read this book with them. It took us a very long time, and it is entirely my fault because in the meantime I was pregnant and then I gave birth, and that's just my excuse. I couldn't find, the time or the will to actually pick this one up. The fact that it took us so long did not diminish the joy that I experienced rereading this. I first read The Lord of the Rings when I was 11. I was very young, but it left some sort of it left such an impression on me. I think it's one of the most important books in my life. So I think a reread was due, since that one was the only one that I actually read the book. And then I watched the movies, I think twice, not a lot, again, but I was so surprised to find how much I remembered, how many, even sentences, they were just so vivid in my mind. It was just so exciting to get back to this story and to these characters that I love so much. We had so much fun, and I'm very glad that I picked this book up again. Yeah, I kicked the tripod, so I'm sorry if the frame is messed up. The last book that I want to talk about is Daphne du Maurier's Frenchmans Creek. As you probably know if you're following my channel, I am reading all of the Daphne du Maurier books in publication order. I didn't have a great time, especially in the beginning, because I did not really love her first novels. Then I read Rebecca and what's that called? And Jamaica Inn, which I really enjoyed. Then I read Frenchmans Creek, and again, I really enjoyed this one. It was not my favorite though, but it was still an enjoyable, quick read. So it was fast-paced. It had all the elements that are typical, I would say, of Daphne du Maurier, like the sea, some sort of mischief. We have this kind of main character that's not very much likable. I think she really enjoys unlikable characters. So there is this Donna. She is very rich and very self-centered, I would say. She's bored and she seeks for some adventure and some true love, and retreats in this kind of estate, her husband's estate, called Navron, and with her actually two children that she doesn't really take into much consideration, but yeah, so she retreats in this kind of estate, and she entangles with this sort of intrigue with the pirate, and of course, and she falls in love with him. I would have loved a little bit more teasing between them. It's so, it's very clear that they're falling in love. It's actually almost love at first sight, which I'm not a fan of. But other than that, it was an enjoyable little book to read, and I would recommend, this kind of book if you love Daphne du Maurier. The book that I was stuck with, that I DNF'd, and I'm going to briefly mention it in my next video, just because I feel like this one is already too long, was also, a Daphne du Maurier book, and it is Hungry Hill. Very long book about basically mining. I'm not sure that I talked about this book already on my channel, but I will not, go into much detail. It's just that I was not really enjoying it. I was, I think, 100 pages in, and yeah, I debated with myself for the entire month whether to DNF this or not, just because it's a Daphne du Maurier book and I really am faithful to my project, but I don't have time to waste on books that I don't enjoy reading. So gave up on this one, would not recommend, and this is it for this video. I'm sorry if it was very long and jumbled, but I hope you found this interesting nonetheless, and let me know if you read any of the books that I mentioned, if you have suggestions, if you just want to talk to me in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!